I'm going to get started now and introduce everyone to Dr. Sybil Wyatt, who is a recent graduate of the doctoral program in higher education administration here at UMKC. Sybil is also the Title IX coordinator at UMKC and the director of affirmative action, and probably some other titles that I can't remember. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself a little bit, Dr. Wyatt, and then we'll talk about cohort relationships and advising relationships.
Sure. Well, you pretty much covered it. I mean, I do a number of other functions at the university, but for the most part, I use my law degree and my EDD to assist me in just working through issues that come up, discrimination and harassment, and all sexual misconduct issues, and then consult on a lot of other conduct issues and First Amendment type things that come up here at the university. So pretty busy.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I'm going to start with you the question that I've been asking everyone in this interview series, which is, what made you decide to pursue the EDD?
Well, I am a huge proponent of higher education, which I guess makes sense. I work at a university, right? But I use coursework as a hobby. So people always think I'm crazy, but I really enjoy learning and I like it in a structured environment. I kind of thrive on that performance-based evaluation that my instructors give me, on top of the fact that I like the collegiality with my peers who are also interested in the same types of courses that I'm taking. That's not to say I love every course that I end up taking as part of a degree program, but that's part of it. And then the other part is I knew that I wanted to advance in my career. With a law degree, I'm really narrowly focused in higher education. You can either teach in a law school or you can do the type of work that I do now. But I knew that with an EDD, I could expand my skill set and I would also have more credibility should I take on more student affairs type positions, or if I ever wanted to teach as a faculty member, then I would need to have that doctorate, or I felt like I would need to have that doctorate. And so that's really kind of the twofold reason.
Great. We should say that you had your JD prior to pursuing the EDD.
Yes.
Did you also have a master's degree before the JD?
Yeah, so I have a master's degree in criminal justice, and I also went through the master's program here at UMKC for higher ed.
That's right. And then since graduating with the EDD, you've started the MBA program.
Yes.
So I want to say that because you're serious when you say that, when you say that academic coursework is your hobby.
Yeah.
But also you have really varied your interests
yes.
to align with some of the career directions that you're
for sure. And I think every time I choose the next step in my degree pursuits, it's always in anticipation of what might be coming next. Where could I use those skills? How do they expand my knowledge base and my I guess my flexibility in where I might be able to work in higher education. So
great. Well, I've asked you here today to talk about two topics. The first is cohort dynamics and relationships, and the second is advisor relationships. In a module that I think I'm calling Making Good Relationships or something like that for this week in our class. First I wanted to think about cohort relationships. What things did your cohort do that helped develop community amongst itself? What things worked and didn't work?
So a few things that really worked for us, we got a Facebook page that was closed just to our group. And so every time we had, anything that we felt like jokes that we had amongst our cohort, we would post, appropriate, of course. If there was right, if a concern came up, like with somebody's family member or something like that, we would post so that the group would know. We also sometimes, to be honest, sometimes we would air our frustrations with the program or a class or an assignment. If someone was having trouble with an assignment, they might post a question, or they hadn't been in a class and just needed someone to run through as a refresher. So we used Facebook a lot. We also exchanged cell phone numbers and we text one another. Early on, it was really just for individuals who might be absent from class. Hey, can you take notes for me or share your notes or something like that? But then as we progressed on, we started to make time outside of class for one another. So we did happy hours, we did dinners or lunches. Even the students there was a good portion of our cohort that worked at UMKC. But even students who didn't work in UMKC, we would do the later, the happy hour type events so that we could have them come just a little early before we'd have class in the evenings, or we would do it after class sometimes. So we tried to create a support network, is what I thought of it as. We, each one of us has our own support network, personal network that we use, but they never understand what you're really going through. Even if you happen to have someone in your network that has a doctorate, it's not the same. Their program's not the same as yours, and the things that you're going to go through and experience are just not the same as theirs. So I think we really tried very hard to be that support for one another and that encouragement. There were often times when members of the cohort would reach out to each other one-on-one and just grab a bite to eat for lunch or a cup of coffee and say, we're all at different places in our careers. We would ask each other for career advice, or you work in a field that I'm interested in. What did you do to get there? The longer we were in our cohort, the more we learned about each other and the more comfortable you feel. And I will be honest, one of the challenges for our cohort was when new folks came in, maybe from the iPhD program, just to take a class with us. And it was making sure they felt included in all of our conversations and inside jokes and things like that. So as we progressed through our coursework, we kind of enveloped other non-EDD students into our group, but we were pretty social as far as that goes. And I would also say, for those of you who are thinking, there's no way I can have that much time to commit to anything outside of class to make these relationships. We didn't have an expectation from anyone. It was, you participate in what you can. So if really all you can do is check your Facebook and make a comment, or send a text message of encouragement once a week to one other person, we might do a roundabout, like I'll pick someone and I send them a message and somebody else sends me one. Things like that, very small contributions. And then some of the others would do meals, would do movies, those types of things. So your cohort really needs to be as flexible as possible on expectations, but really just keep people connected.
Were there things that you all tried, things that bubbled up that didn't work?
So some of the things we did try to schedule a once a week get together outside of class, and that just fell apart. We couldn't commit, even those of us who worked on campus, things would come up, Title IX coordinator, who knows what my day is going to look like. But the same thing happens for individuals who work in the student union. An event may go awry and they need to step in and handle that, or emergency meetings, things like that. So that was a little bit of a struggle. I think sometimes people felt if you didn't make it to the planned lunch, you kind of felt like you were left out. If you did make it, you felt like people weren't always making the time. And so we just said, let's not try to do the weekly. Let's just do it as we can. We'll mark special events. If someone completed their proposal, or they, at a point when their literature review was approved, things like that, we would make it a deal out of it. But or end of the semester, things like that. But we really tried to consolidate the more in-person time. I think now our group really would have utilized Zoom more. We would have done a few more things, just had a lunch, like a bring your own lunch type meeting or something. But those are things, trying to have a great deal of contact outside of class was sort of challenging sometimes.
It's definitely easier now that we're, for this period of time, however long it lasts, where we're all sitting at the desk already, and probably eating at our desk already, to just say, like, I'm eating at 12, who else is here? I'm opening up this Zoom link, anyone wants to come. More people are around than before, when it was like, oh, I have to get all the way across campus or all the way across town. So there is that benefit, I guess, of being online right now.
I guess there's the Zoom exhaustion though too, where all of us are saying, oh wow, I can't take a single other Zoom meeting.
Although I do think that sometimes the social Zoom is a little different than than the work Zoom. You were mentioning, for my doctoral cohort, we did similar things where we weren't necessarily as a large group of 15 or 18 getting together very often. Maybe once a term we would get together for a happy hour. But definitely when someone defended their proposal or defended their dissertation,
Yes.
we would try to get together to celebrate over lunch or dinner or happy hour, and then the whole group would come together. And I mean, honestly, when you're in your first class, that does seem kind of far off.
Yeah.
So you have to sort of manufacture some reasons to get together before that. Like we survived our first class, or we survived the, first semester or whatever. But to know that those events are coming and kind of thinking what are the different things we can celebrate along the way are definitely good ways to do that. I agree.
Sure.
Yeah. So you've kind of touched on this, but so if you're thinking about, one of the things that I think, I'm changing my question, sorry, midstream.
Good.
One of the things that can be hard sometimes in a cohort is that you want to develop relationships with everyone, but also you may feel more connected to a smaller group within the cohort.
Sure.
How do you develop those strong bonds without creating like cliques or sort of sectioning off? Do you have any suggestions for how to really maintain that strong overall, but also still developing those relationships?
So I think that's a natural part of being a human, right? We build relationships with people we feel like we are connected to for whatever reason it might be. And so I think you can't avoid that. One of the things that I often did was make it a point to be in connection with folks that didn't naturally gravitate toward me, or I didn't to them. So just talking to them before class, talking about their research or their interests or their job, asking questions. For me, small talk is very challenging if I don't know you very well. And sometimes even if I do know you, it's not my forte, which people are always surprised. But I would have to push myself as a person to say, reach out to people that this doesn't come naturally. And starting that early on developed those relationships with my cohort that I normally might not have had. And then it really acted as a network or a glue that held other folks in the cohort together, because I was pulling in various people. And there were others. I don't mean to say that I was the only one. We all kind of did that. We were cognizant of the fact that we didn't want to isolate anyone. We already felt isolated, I think, because pursuing a doctorate is not something that everybody does. And sometimes your family isn't as supportive. Why are you doing this? You're working full time, you have kids, you have responsibilities. And so we really, I think, worked hard to include everyone. I think the bigger groups, the Facebook group and the celebration group, were always, we want to make sure as much as possible that the entire cohort was engaged. And then I think there were just times when you are going to have one-on-one lunch with folks more often than others. And there's no reason to feel guilty about that part. You just do your best then to incorporate others into interactions that you have in class, so that you don't always have private secrets that you're talking about or whatever. It's kind of like avoiding cliques when you're in high school, right? Same thing. You just try to get engaged with as many people as you can.
Definitely. Yeah. And I know too, sometimes I've been the person who is the person who's the group bringer. And sometimes I'm the person who's like, wait, where's my people? And
right. Where's my tribe?
I think sometimes, you've been so busy or you're distracted by some other things going on in your life that you have to remember you need to be reaching out to make some of those relationships. So don't be afraid to reach out.
And I would say I also use the coursework environment as a learning tool from other people who aren't the instructor. So throughout my time in the EDD program, my cohort taught me so much about what they do, but also their experiences in higher ed, what it was like at their institutions. I mean, I used that time selfishly to gain knowledge and experience, in a kind of a third party way that I wouldn't have had if I wouldn't have been in the EDD cohort. So
for sure.
It benefited me even more to reach out to folks that I normally wouldn't have, perhaps.
For sure. If you had to think of 2 norms that you would suggest for a cohort, this was not on my suggested list of questions I sent to you, but
Throw
I'm
the
just
tough
thinking
ones
about
out, right?
yeah, I'm just like, now I'm just footloose and fancy free. If you were to think about 2 norms that you would suggest for a cohort, what 1 or 2 would you suggest that you would think would be important for the cohort to agree upon?
So I think one is respect one another's time. That's one of the big ones. So you take people as they are. We talk about taking students, meeting students where they are. You have to meet each other where you are. So some individuals will want to be really engaged and some won't. And you can't take that personally. And really, even when you're in group projects or you are, working on team projects and classes and things, you have to make sure that your work life and your personal life doesn't overshadow what you've committed to do for your group. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the most important part of any team project, of course. But in this case, you have to acknowledge that everybody in your cohort is busy. Yeah. And we're all busy with different things. Some may have children and some may not. Some have partners and some don't. Some have, other individuals they're caring for. Some people are just really engaged in their community. And so not judging one another when time is tight, but really putting that commitment into to getting things done on time, whatever it is you agree upon. And at the same time, giving each other a little bit of flexibility, right? Not saying, okay, this is going to be done at midnight on Sunday and 12:05 rolls around and you're, already kind of panicky. And that's kind of hard for people who are like very deadline oriented, right? Yeah. So I think that's one, just respect one another's time. Yeah. And then the other piece is, I think, really acknowledge that each one of the people in your cohort at some point will be the smartest person in the room. Mm. They will have more experience than you do at whatever you're talking about. And a lot of times you will work in an area and you think, okay, my area is student conduct. So I know everything about student conduct. And there may be somebody else in your class that also does student conduct or maybe did before or any area of higher ed. Mm-hmm. And they will maybe know more than you, or they'll know things that are different than you. So I think it's giving space for everyone in the cohort to be an expert in something. There's also kind of an idea sometimes that you won't know enough, right? You're going into this EDD program and there are going to be people who have a vastly different set of skills, professional experiences, education. And on the same token, in that there will be times when you're the expert, there will also be times when you do not know anything. Yes. And acknowledging that that's okay as a cohort right from the beginning. We're going to give you the space to be the one who answers the questions, who talks the most in class that night. And then at the same time, we're also going to give you the leeway to acknowledge in class, excuse me, I have no idea what you just meant by what you said to the instructor or to one of your classmates, right? Yeah, I really like that. In fact, we'll be talking about imposter syndrome next week, but I was just talking with my spouse about this, that I'm in a group of scholars who study spirituality and religion. And honestly, half the time I do not even understand the words they're saying. And they're so smart and I love it. And I mean, I love that I'm a part of this group because I just learn from them constantly, but also half the time I feel like, right. I don't know what you said. And it's really, and I mean, I have to just go in saying like, it's okay. It's okay that I don't know what they're talking about. So I love those. Hey, that is a bonus. We got 3 norm suggestions for the price of 2. And I think those are really good suggestions. So thank you for that. Hopefully the group will hear that and be thinking about how to incorporate those into the norms that they're writing for the assignment this week. Awesome. We're going to switch gears now and think about advising relationships. Sure. So first, I'm going to say, I know you had a couple different advisors during your EDD program, and so there's a lot mixed up in the next few questions that I'm going to ask you. And second, one of those advisors was this person right here. And so you and I have already talked about this off recording, but I'm going to say out loud on the recording that you know that you can talk about both the good and the bad of having me for an advisor and or anyone else.
and it's fine. I recognize that I am just a human. My advising is developing as it is. So what I will say is one of the things I really appreciated about one of the norms you said is about being the smartest person in the room and about not knowing, is that one of the things I appreciate about being an advisor myself and about being an instructor is that I'm learning from my students all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so even in the classroom space, even when I am the expert in a topic because I've read about it or taught about it or
Mm-hmm.
experienced it, I love listening to my students and hearing how they've interpreted the material or how they've experienced it in the past, and either watching them become experts or hearing their expertise come out in the classroom. So I want my students to know that that's true both in the classroom and in the advising process.
Mm-hmm.
When my students are writing their dissertations, they are the experts on that topic. I have not done the research. So as you know, Sybil, I'm often like, well, I know a little bit about this, but
Right.
wow, this is a fascinating topic that I'm excited to learn more about from you. So thinking about your advising, over the course of your doctorate, how did advising look differently when you were in coursework versus when you were writing your dissertation?
So for me, I think in the beginning it was really helping me to manage my time. As far as course expectations, was I taking too many courses, not enough? Would those courses be easier if I would take them in a different order? I had a lot more flexibility with my courses in that I brought in, as you can imagine, quite a few credits.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of my cohort were taking 3 courses in a semester, and I may have only been taking 2. And so trying to work through that with my advisor, although I was fairly independent, I think in the first probably 2 years of coursework, I didn't really meet with my advisor. There was not a lot of discussion even on, hey, let's talk about, your research or what you think you might do or anything like that. I really got all of that from the classes that I was in. As I was going through courses, I already had an idea when I started. I knew I wanted to do it in Title IX. I knew I wanted it to parallel my work. But I developed kind of more and more of a plan through the classes. So my connection with my advisor was pretty small in the beginning. And then I moved to a different advisor. And I will say, I like that you pointed out that in my case, especially, there wasn't a faculty member who was an expert in Title IX at all, or had any experience in Title IX regulations or laws or anything. And so what I really got from my advisor kind of in the interim between almost being done with classes and not quite ready to put together a formal proposal was things about a dissertation generally. Like, what are the expectations for chapters 1, 2, and 3? What are, how much is enough? Where do you go to really, I guess, what's the difference between, okay, if I want to do a survey, like how much time is that really going to take? Yeah. Because when you're thinking about it, you're thinking, oh, that'll be really easy. I'll put it together and I'll send it out. And then you're like, oh, I've got to get review board approval. I've got to get, human subject research. And so all of those pieces, really talking about what I wanted my project to look like and how much of a time commitment I wanted to put into my dissertation as far as my research. I mean, I wanted to have robust research, but I also knew I have limits on how long I want this to take, as far as number of years, and what do I day to day, what's my commitment look like to data process and all of that. So just trying to make a decision on that piece of it in between kind of the second and third year, I think was really important, because then you need to decide, am I taking a quantitative class, qualitative classes, where am I going with this, and really getting into that process. So it was the structure of a dissertation. I mean, I had an idea. I'd been around PhD programs for years, but really delving into what a doctorate looked like. And then my final advisor was more of a back and forth discussion. And it was when I was actively working on my proposal and getting everything ready to have that approved so I could move on with my research, engaged a lot. Back and forth, sharing edits, talking about what I needed more of, word usage, all of that sort of thing, the most professional product that could be put out. then I went into kind of a lull and didn't work on my dissertation actively for some time, a period of time, which FYI, on a side, was the worst mistake I made during the whole process. Because
don't get in a lull.
No, when I had personal time to do the dissertation, I didn't take it. And then when I really wanted to kick it into gear so I could graduate, it was like overwhelming. I remember you and I talking about Sybil, there's no way this is gonna, I kept saying, but I can. And you're like, realistic. Remember, this is all the things you have to do. And so it was really an engagement back and forth rather than just you sharing with me your knowledge and expertise on the EDD process. It was, what do you expect as a faculty member? What will my dissertation committee expect of me in order to commit to this process and then to finish it out? And so it was really a two-way street. We would both ask each other questions. We had lots of edits or comments. And there were times when I would say, well, in the field of work that I'm in, this actually makes the most sense. And so we would engage because maybe it wasn't the most scholarly method of working on a project, but the way I'm structuring that sentence makes sense, or the way I'm talking about a Title IX coordinator, something like that. So, and then so the lull happened, and this was probably, I think, the worst part of the advisor-advisee relationship is when you are trying to avoid your advisor because they keep saying, hey, do you have anything for me to edit? Like, are you making progress? And you're like, you're trying to say, oh, I will, I'll have it to you by the end of the month or whatever. And then you don't. So that's the part where you start to feel like, I am never going to get this done. I just am not. And then you have this personal, like, I'm letting my advisor down. Right. And you feel that. And so that's I think the part about an advisor, the closer you are aligned in a relationship with that advisor, the more you feel that way, is like, I want to get this done, not only for me and my family and everyone, but for my advisor, because they're putting all this work into this relationship. And so then at the end, it really is a push by your advisor. Like, if you want to finish, you've got to have this written. You've got to have this. You've got to have it edited. We've got to meet. And so then it's really like a snow shovel going through the big piles of snow. Like, come on, let's get going. So it definitely shifts, and some advisors, I will say, you connect with more readily. I think that's so important in a program like this. It's, as an undergraduate, it was important, but not as much for me. I was fairly independent. And in my master's program, I think probably the same. But in a doctoral program, early on, my advisor and I, we didn't click. We didn't connect. And the thing I valued the most was you and I did. We had a lot that we could talk about, and you understood where I was coming from, and you. And so I would say there are times when your advisor may not be the person that you connect most closely with in the EDD program. And so if you don't have that type of relationship with your advisor where you can really connect, you can utilize that relationship with your advisor as much as possible, but you might also need a mentor. It's a separate individual. So don't hesitate to find one of those persons if you need to.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because the students in the cohort right now, our plan is that they'll have an advisor that's assigned at the beginning of the program. They may choose, as they move into their dissertation, a different dissertation supervisor, basically the dissertation chair, from among the ELPF faculty, because we have more faculty that have different methodology and concentrations than just in our higher ed program. So they have a possibility of changing their chair and their advisor midway through. But there's always the possibility of expanding your advising relationship into additional mentoring. And so even if you have a good connection with your advisor, having an additional mentor, if you can find one, is a great resource. And talking to your advisor about mentors that might be available, even something you can do if you're not sure where to find one. I appreciated what you said about near the end, how your advisor sort of begins to push as you approach that deadline. I was up against the deadline of having a baby, and I said, I want to get this paper done before my baby comes. And my advisor said, well, then you have to have your dissertation done by this date. And I said, what?
Yeah.
And she said, yeah. And I said, so, and she backed it up for me and she said, you need to have this done by this and this done by this and this done by this. And I was like, okay.
Like how am I, yeah, how am I going to manage that?
So I guess I will do that.
Right.
And I had also had a lull in there where I was like, oh, la-di-da, I'm going to get married and not work on it for a while. And then after I got defended my proposal, I was like, la-di-da, this is fun, whatever. So there's definitely a sense of the ebb and flow. And I think from an advisor perspective, this is true of myself. I think it's true of Dr. Maher as well. I assume it's true of some of the other advisors in our program. We are not going to be saying to you, hey, you didn't turn this into me on the 1st of March like you told me you would. Where is it? Because I have a lot of students to manage. If you tell me March 1st is your deadline, I'm going to trust that you're going to send it to me on March 1st. And like in March, early March, I'm going to say, I got that thing from Sybil.
Yep.
I'm going to email you and say, hey, did I get that? Did I miss it?
Yep. And I'm going to say, no, you didn't.
I'm working on it. You're going to say, I'm working on it. I was planning to send it to you by Friday.
Yeah. And then in literally 3 days, I'm trying to get done what I had a month and a half to do. Yeah.
And so first of all, advisors know that's what you're doing. And here's why, because we were doctoral students too. Yeah. So we know that. And I mean, we're not going to call you on it most of the time because you're people and we're people and we understand. But it's okay to also say, hey, I'm really having trouble overcoming this resistance, or I'm really having trouble figuring out how to incorporate this, or I'm really feeling overwhelmed and I haven't made progress.
Yeah.
Because you do want to be able to say hello to your advisor at the holiday breakfast.
Yes. Yes. And not hide.
Like, you don't want to be like avoiding them in the corner of the room behind the coat rack, hoping that they don't say hello to you. And then in the course of conversation, say, by the way, don't you owe me a chapter?
Yep.
Which I will do.
Yeah. She will.
I don't think I did it to Sybil, but I will do it. I have done it to some other of my advisors.
No, because I would usually say before you ever got a chance to say it, oh, I know I owe you that chapter. I'm so sorry. I would call myself out. Like, yeah I totally owe you that.
So I do think you're right that relationship that you have with your advisor, as it grows as you grow in connection, there definitely becomes a burden of feeling like part of the reason why you want to turn it in is because they're expecting it of you. And part of that's by design. So I talk to students about how the writing, the expectation shifts to the student when the dissertation comes. So faculty aren't setting deadlines for you like in class anymore. Now it goes to the student. But we still have to, as faculty, have some way to set an expectation for you to meet these deadlines. And that relationship deadline, that relationship is a way to do that. And I'm not meaning that as a manipulation. I just mean, it's not like I sit around thinking, if I become better friends with them, they will support work. I just mean, hopefully, as we become better in mutual trust with each other, we'll commit to those deadlines. The same way you talked about with your cohort, respecting each other's time. If I need 2 weeks of turnaround and you need to get something done by April, like you need to have something returned to you by April, you're going to get it to me in time to get it back to you by April.
And then not be upset if you take an extra week to give the turnaround because we're all people, right?
Exactly. So we need to have that as we develop that relationship, having that grace, I agree, is important. Mm-hmm. Thinking about communication with your advisor, are there any tips you would give to students as they communicate with their advisors? What are some recommendations that you have for making sure that they're staying in communication, that they're communicating well? What have you learned about communication?
I think the number one is, again, just respect their time. Know that if you send an email, at 6 o'clock on a Monday, it may be Friday before you get a response, depending upon the desperate need that you have versus whatever else they've got going on. Because again, they're people too. And if it's you have to own your responsibility, right? So if you need to meet with your advisor before you choose your classes, or that you need your advisor to sign off on something, giving them a good enough heads up so that they can plan you into their schedule rather than just showing up at their office and expecting they're going to drop everything or be in their office. Right. Exactly. I think, and my other is that I think as students, regardless of what level you are, you expect your advisor to always have the answers. You expect your instructors to always have the answers. And I think you need to realize again that they are not, and this is not in any kind of critique, but just they're just real people.
Yeah.
And they can't always give you the answer that you need right then. They can give you some advice. They can say, this is what I did, but it may not work for you.
Yeah.
And I think that you also have to realize that they're going to make mistakes. And I don't mean big mistakes, but maybe your email gets lost in a pile of emails and it's 2 weeks. You can always send a, hey, just wanted to, like, a friendly reminder about my email, right? That's fine. It's when you start the, hey, you haven't answered my email yet and I really need the response, that you kind of have that breakdown of your advisor's relationship. Yeah. So it's the golden rule, right? You want to be treated in a certain way, you should treat others in that way. So I think that goes to your advisor as well.
Yeah, good. My last question for today, what, if anything, surprised you about the advisor-advisee relationship?
I would say I was so independent in every degree program I'd ever had that the only time I ever went to see my advisor for the most part was if I had to get a signature in order to register for classes. And I get to the point where I would just email my advisor and have a schedule and they would sign off. Undergrad, grad school, all of that. And I, in some ways, almost saw my advisor as an adversary early on in any program, because I had a way I wanted to do things. And my advisor wasn't always okay with that, because ultimately, especially in a doctoral program, there's a way that you're going to take classes in a certain order. You're going to, have to complete a certain number of classes by a certain time, those types of things. And there are rules and you're going to follow them, right? In order to graduate. There's a lot more flexibility in a doctoral program, I think, than an undergraduate degree, perhaps, but still rules. And I saw, I initially approached the doctoral advisor relationship as a barrier to my finishing, because things I wanted to do or whatever. Once I retooled my thinking and really started to connect with my advisor, initially the first advisor I connect with was Michelle, Dr. Maher. And that was prior to me having you as my advisor. And even just our brief interactions really taught me more about what an advisor was supposed to look like in a doctoral program, and let me release that kind of adversarial idea. And then by the time you and I were able to engage as an advisor and advisee, I had moved past that and really used you as a resource and a guide, a mentor. And I'd always heard people talk about their advisors as mentors, but I'd never had one that acted in that way. And so my mentors had always come from external to my educational program, really people in the fields I wanted to be in, that sort of thing. So that was surprising. Like, wow, that kind of came out of the blue. And I didn't realize that was even happening until you and I really started to engage on my proposal. And I thought, oh, wow, she's very helpful. And then it kind of went from there, right? It wasn't like, oh, she's keeping me back, telling me I can't do, like someone would say, well, this is not enough, or you need to restructure these sentences or paragraphs, or maybe I worked on something really hard and we're cutting the whole page. And I would get really upset, like, really? And then when I quit using that relationship as a barrier, a block to where I wanted to go and really a resource, it was a much better relationship.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's important to say, I definitely said to you, you're going to have to cut this whole page.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There were times, cut the page, cut this
by half, this whole section, make it half as long. Yes.
Yep. And I'm very wordy. And so trying to cut, but then in other sections you would say, okay, we need to expand this. And I'd be like, what? So yeah, you get that kind of feedback. And sometimes you just feel like the person it's not that you feel like you are in your own way. You feel like the advisor's in your way, or the dissertation chair is in your way, but they're not. That's not, they're not at all. You're in your own way.
Yeah, it's definitely a process. And I think I like hearing you say that, because there is a sense of coming alongside for advisors, of coming alongside the proposal process and helping shape it into what it's supposed to be, and not, it's not my job to say this isn't a good topic, or redirect a person into an acceptable or approachable or whatever topic. It's my job to say, let's make sure that this fits a gap. Like, let's make sure you weren't writing about something that everyone in all creation is already writing about. Let's find the nuance, right? Let's make it manageable. So that's something you and I talked about, right? Like you can't look at the Title IX statement of every university.
Yeah. I had a huge group. I mean, a huge expansive spreadsheet. And then
I failed at making yours manageable.
You were like, well, no, I remember me saying, well, I have like 1,000 institutions, and you're like, no, not gonna work. Not gonna work. I'm like, what? It's fine.
So there is a sense of the advisor's role is to come along and help in partnership move it forward. We're not there to be a barrier. We're there to help be a guide, because our job is to help bring you into the field as a colleague. We're not, now some faculty in some programs may feel differently. Some may feel like gatekeepers rather than door people, right? Yeah. But I think both Dr. Maher and I feel like our job is to train up our future colleagues into this profession, and we want to do that in the way that helps you build your interest and engagement, and do so in a way that trains you well so that you have a successful first experience on this dissertation process. So I'm glad to hear you say that. Sybil, thank you so much for spending time today with me and with our class and talking about these relationships. I really appreciate it, and you.
Yeah, of course, no problem. And I would just say to anyone in the cohort, number one, congratulations for starting on this new path. And number two, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to take you to a cup of coffee or virtual coffee anytime, or a soda, and just chat with you. So
great. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.